Chapter 5. Love and Rebellion. Forward. So, what is Marius's idea? It is this. He wants to marry Cosette, but he has no money. His grandfather has money. He must ask his grandfather. But his grandfather is an old man, and old men's ideas do not change easily. He shouts at Marius. Marius shouts back, and that is the end of that. The next evening, he goes as usual to the Rue Plumet. There is nobody in the garden. The house is dark. The windows are closed. Cosette and her father are gone. Marius cannot live without Cosette. He wants to die. But Gavroche tells him that his friends need him. It is June 1832, and students and workers are running through the streets of Paris, bringing rebellion to the city, and everyone must fight the government. Marius is soon at the barricades with a gun in his hand. He is happy. Death can come at any moment with a bullet from a soldier's gun. These are dangerous times. Jean Valjean sees Inspector Javert in a street near the Rue Plumet. What is he doing there? Are the police watching his house? Valjean does not wait. The same night, he and Cosette leave Rue Plumet. They move to 7 Rue de l'Homme Armé and begin to get ready for England. How can love find a way in these troubled times? When the soldiers attacked in front of the Arsenal building, the people turned and ran, this way and that way, through the streets of the city. Marius and his friends came to the Rue de la Chanvrerie, and they built their barricade there. It was 2 meters high, made of wood and stone. Behind their barricade, the rebels waited for the soldiers. Night came, but nothing happened. Enjolras was the leader of the students. He called Gavroche to him. "You're small," he said. "Nobody sees you. Go and have a look round the city, and then bring us any news." Just after midnight, Gavroche was back. "The soldiers aren't moving," he said. "But there are a lot of them." He stopped suddenly and whispered, "Hey, who's that? That tall man over there." Enjolras and Marius turned to look. "I don't know him," said Marius. "People are coming and going all night," said Enjolras. "Why, Gavroche? Do you know him?" "Yes," whispered Gavroche. "He's not one of us. He's a spy. A police spy. Name of Javert. He stopped me once down by the river. Put me in prison all night."
"Are you certain about this, Gavroche?"
said Marius.
"I'm certain all right," said Gavroche. "He's a spy."
The rebels did not like spies. 4 of Enjolras' men jumped on Javert, pulled him into the tavern behind the barricade, and tied him to the wall.
"Do we shoot him now?"
asked one of the men. "Later," said Enjolras. "He can wait." They went back outside to the barricade and listened for the sound of soldiers. Gavroche found Marius at the far end of the barricade.
"Marius," he whispered. "On my way back here, I came past your rooms and went in."
"Why?"
whispered Marius.
"I was hungry,"
said Gavroche.
"The woman in your house is nice. She always gives me something to eat. But she had a letter for you. She gave it to me. It came 2 days ago," she said.
"A letter? A letter from whom?"
Suddenly, there was hope in Marius's heart.
"Quick, give it to me."
The letter was from Cosette.
"My dearest, Father says we must leave at once. We go tonight to 7 Rue de l'Homme Armé, and soon to England. Oh, my dear, how can I live without you? Cosette."
Marius read this letter 4 times and then kissed it. She still loved him. He must write back to her and say his last goodbye. There was still no sound of soldiers in the street. He found some paper and a pencil.
"Cosette, dearest, I came to the Rue Plumet, but you were gone already. We cannot marry. I went to my grandfather, and he said no. I have no money, and you have no money. I love you. I can never forget you. The fighting begins here very soon. When I am dead, don't be sad. Our love was beautiful. Marius."
He called to Gavroche.
"I want you to take this letter to the Rue de l'Homme Armé. Can you do that for me?"
"Yes, but not now," said Gavroche. "I'm staying here for the fighting. I can shoot too, you know."
"Gavroche, you're just a boy. We don't want you to die in the fighting. Stay away from the shooting. And this letter is very important to me. It must go now. I want you to put it into Cosette's hands. Please, Gavroche."
"Oh, very well,"
said Gavroche. He took the letter, put it inside his shirt, and ran off into the dark. When Valjean and Cosette left the house in Rue Plumet, Cosette was very sad. Valjean saw this, but he said nothing. In the Rue de l'Homme Armé, Cosette stayed in her bedroom. Toussaint took her meals up to her. In the night, Valjean could not sleep. The city was quiet, but for how long? He went outside the house and stood in the street, listening. There were voices in the next street, and then he heard singing. A boy singing. Gavroche came up the street, looking at the house numbers. He saw Valjean and stopped.
"Well, young man, what's the news?"
said Valjean.
"The news is that I'm hungry,"
said Gavroche. Valjean put his hand in his pocket and found a 5-franc piece. Gavroche stared at it. He didn't see many 5-franc pieces, and he was very pleased to see this one. He put it in his pocket. "You're all right," he said. "Do you live in this street? Do you know number 7?
What do you want with number 7? Said Valjean.
Letter for someone, said Gavroche. A woman. Valjean stared at him. He felt cold. A woman. Cosette? He remembered at once the young man in the Luxembourg. He tried to smile.
"Ah, that's the letter for Cosette," he said. "I'm waiting for it."
"Yes, that's her." "Well, here you are," said Gavroche. "It comes from the barricade in the Rue de la Chanvrerie. I'm going back there now. Good night, monsieur." Jean Valjean went back into the house with Marius's letter. He read it quickly. "I love you. I can never forget you." So, Cosette, his dear, dear daughter, was in love. She was his world. Without her, his life was nothing. He could not even think about it. "When I am dead, don't be sad." Those words gave him hope. So the young man was one of the rebels at the barricade.
"When the soldiers start shooting," he thought, "that's the end of all the rebels. I do nothing. I say nothing. I keep this letter and poof, nothing changes in our lives." But Valjean did not feel easy. He remembered all their happy years as father and daughter, and he saw again Cosette's sad eyes when they left the Rue Plumet. How could he take her away to England? He turned and went out of the room. A little later, he left the house wearing dark clothes and carrying a gun, and walked away down the street. Chapter 6. The Barricades. Forward. It is a long night at the barricade in the Rue de la Chanvrerie. The news is bad. More and more soldiers are arriving in the city, but the people stay in their homes. This time, they don't want to fight the government. Only the students are still at the barricades, waiting for the soldiers' bullets and death. Then, a new man arrives at the barricade. A big man in dark clothes. Marius stares. It is Cosette's father. He is certain. Is he a friend or an enemy? Who knows? Inside the tavern, Javert too waits for death. Rebels shoot spies. He knows that. Does he think about his life, waiting there in the tavern? Is the law always right? Can a criminal change and be a good man? Does Javert ask these questions? Who knows? Daylight comes, and the shooting begins. Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat on the barricade, noise and shouting, cries and screams. Valjean
saves Enjolras' life. 2 men die. Valjean carries the bodies into the tavern, sees Javert, and Javert sees him. Then the shooting stops. The rebels need more bullets, and Gavroche runs out to the front of the barricade. "Come back, Gavroche!" He doesn't listen and starts singing. There are dead soldiers lying in the street. Gavroche takes the bullets from their bags and puts them into his bag. He is small and quick, and his bag is nearly full before the soldiers start shooting at him. "Come back, Gavroche!" He sings louder, but the 5th bullet hits him, and he falls down in the street. He moves once, then falls back. Gavroche is dead. A child of the Paris streets, his singing now stopped forever, just another dead body in the rebellion. Smoke from the guns is everywhere. It is hard to see anything. But Marius runs out into the street, picks Gavroche up, and runs back. He puts the small body on a table in the tavern and cries. It is going to be a long day. Behind the barricade, Enjolras talked to the men. "They're going to attack again soon. 60 soldiers to every one of us. Marius and I are your 2 leaders. Gavroche brought us bullets, so let's use them well and fight to the end."
"Let's kill the spy now,"
said one of the men. Then Valjean spoke.
"Give him to me. I can do that for you. I'd like to shoot him."
Enjolras looked at him. "You saved my life, friend. You can have the spy." Valjean took Javert out of the tavern to a little street behind. He took out a knife.
"Ah, a knife," said Javert. "Of course, a criminal's way to kill. So, kill me, and be quick."
Valjean said nothing. He cut the ropes around Javert's arms and legs, then stood up and said, "You're free to go." Javert stared. He could not understand this.
"I live in the Rue de l'Homme Armé,"
Valjean said. "The next time we meet, you can arrest me. Now, go." Javert turned and walked away. Valjean fired his gun into the air, then went back to the barricade. "It's done," he told Enjolras. Now the second attack began. The government had more men, more guns, more bullets, and, one by one, the students began to die. Marius was on top of the barricade. He was one of the last men still alive, but then 1, 2 bullets hit him, and he fell. 2 great hands at once picked him up.
"Cosette,"
whispered Marius, and then he went into that dark night. Jean Valjean knew Paris well, knew its little back streets, its secret places. He used them now. With the dead or dying Marius in his arms, he ran through the back streets, watching at every corner. Night came, and the sky was full of the smoke from the guns. Valjean stopped to rest. In Marius's pocket, he found a piece of paper.
Take my body to my grandfather's house in...
The address was in the Marais, not far away. Valjean began to pick up Marius's body again, and a hand came down hard on his shoulder. Valjean turned. Javert stood behind him. "What are you doing here?" he said. "Who is this man?" Valjean stood up. "Inspector Javert," he said. "I told you. I'm tired of running and hiding. You can arrest me. Put me back in prison. I ask just one thing. Help me to take this young man home. That is all." "He's dead," said Javert. "No, not yet. He lives in the Marais with his grandfather. Look." He showed Javert the piece of paper. Javert read the address, then called to a carriage along the street. They put Marius's body on the back seat and sat side by side on the front seat. At the house of Marius's grandfather, a servant opened the door. She gave a little scream when she saw Marius in Valjean's arms. "It's Monsieur Marius!" "Take the boy in," said Javert. "I'm waiting for you, here at the door." His voice was different, uncertain. Valjean looked at him, then carried Marius's body into the house. "Call a doctor quickly," he said to the servants. "He was at the barricade and has 2 bullets still in him." Then he came back downstairs and out into the street. Javert was gone. Valjean looked up and down the street. Nothing. Nobody. Down by the river Seine, near the Place du Châtelet, Javert stood on the bridge, looking down into the water. "What must I do?" he thought. But for the first time in his life, he had no answer. Valjean's words at the barricade went through his head again and again. "You're free to go. Free to go. Free to go." "I can do one of 2 things," Javert said to the river. "I can arrest him, or I can not arrest him and say you are free to go. But the law is the law, so I must arrest him. But he gave me my life, so I must give him his life. But the law is the law." And a voice in Javert's head said, "You worked for the law all your life, but Jean Valjean is a better man than you are." For a long time, Javert stared down at the river, but the river gave him no answer to his question. Then he took off his hat and put it carefully on the ground. A moment later, he stood high on the bridge, then fell down into the dark river. There was a splash, and that was all. Chapter 7. Love and Death. Forward. Marius lies for a long time between life and death. But, months later, he is well again. Cosette visits him every day, and this, of course, helps him a lot. His grandfather is happy to have his grandson back and is happy to have a new granddaughter in Cosette. The two young people marry and live in the house of Marius's grandfather in the Marais. There is a surprise for the young people. Cosette has money. A lot of money, Valjean tells them. She has 600,000 francs. This pleases Marius's grandfather very much, but the young people are only interested in love, not in money. Where does it come from, this money? Years ago, when Valjean was Monsieur Madeleine with a factory, he was a rich man. Before he left Montreuil, he took his money and the bishop's candlesticks to a secret place. When he needs money, he goes back there. Now this money is for Cosette, and the candlesticks stand in Valjean's house in the Rue de l'Homme Armé. They look very fine, and Toussaint cleans them every day. A new life begins for everybody, but there are still secrets from the past, and Valjean wants to tell them. He feels old and tired. Death is coming for him at last, he feels. He calls Cosette and Marius to his bedside.
Listen, dearest Cosette, to the story of your mother,
he says. Cosette hears the story of Fantine's sad life. She learns that Valjean is not her real father. But in her life there is only one father, and that is Valjean, she tells him.
Come closer, my children, he says. I love you dearly, and I die happy. Come closer, and take my hands.
Cosette and Marius are by his bed, holding his hands and crying. His great hands are still and do not move again. He lies with his head turned up to the sky, and the light from the bishop's candlesticks falls upon his face.